Akam Yonat in 770 and so forth. So somebody chimed in and says, the Babisher, wherever he is, he's in 770.
You got it. Hold on.
All right, so we are going to proceed now on page Kuf Nun Tes. And we have to start on the second line. We're actually in the third line, but we have to start in the second line, right almost in the beginning. Here's what we're discussing. The night made a big hefsek between what we learned, what our learning from yesterday and today. Therefore, we have to refresh. We're talking about the oir and keli. The oir is a direct emanation, spirit, inspiration, coming from the source, from the divine source itself. Oil is an emanation from something, from the reality itself. That's called oil. Just as sunlight comes from the sun, because sun is light through and through. That's called the essence of light. And because sun is the essence of light, wherever the sun comes, the area becomes illuminated because of the light that emanates from the essence of light. So similarly, in Ruchnius, in the Lakus, in the divine present relationship to the world, is a divine effect of divine oil. But in order that it should be effective and speaking on the world level, that spirit coming from, that inspiration coming from the divine has to be contained in what is called a keli. Has to be presented in a world level container. It's called a keli. However, this keli must not conceal the oil that it contains. It must reveal the oil. How does it happen that the keli which carries the oil truly represents and shows the oil and allows it to come forth with its full glory and full beauty? It is due to the phenomenon of beetle in the keli. This beetle is truly a phenomenon where something worldly rises out from worldly limitations and presents its content in its purest manner. That's the way it is in its own truth. This is possible because the kelim, the worldly containers that carry this oil, while they're carrying the oil into the world, the container themselves have an element of beetle. Beetle means that they are not at all speaking of themselves. They don't represent the keli. They represent that which they contain, but not as a secondary, as a second step. It is clear in the keli that this is their primary definition, that they represent the oil. This is due, what was that? Right?
He's going to clean around, but he wants a coffee first.
To the beetle element in the keli. We spoke about beetle a lot, and beetle, as much as you speak about it, it remains some kind of a mystery. Just to put it in context, the mystery aspect of beetle is, beetle means nullification. And nullification in a very fundamental and thorough manner, to the extent that you don't even recognize the presence of the keli, you recognize the presence of the oil that it carries. Yet at the same time, the keli must be present. Because if the keli were removed, the oil would never reach the world. So the keli is an imperative presence, while at the same time, it is completely self-effacing. This is the phenomenal in of keli. As we said yesterday, it's a phenomenal union that it serves and it does a function completely effacing its own presence. Yet, the effect of its presence is obvious as a result of the fact that this oil is brought into the world. This is what's called the phenomenon of beetle. Beetle, just again, self-nullifying but not erasing. Because if it's erased, its service is lost. Then the oil cannot come to the world.
We can't see you anymore.
Okay, we're starting over again. The second line on page Kufnuntes. However, the koyach and the ability in the keli leaves bohem beginners a beetle, such that in the kelim there should be the aspect of beetle, al dehoy, affected by the oil. Even though the beetle is affected by the oil, the keli has to be able to receive the oil in such a manner that it should affect the beetle in the keli. Not just carry oil independently. That does not affect the keli. And the keli, in order for the keli to bring the oil in its purity, because it must have this beetle. It's not enough to bring the oil. You have to be completely self-effacing so that the oil comes in its purity. Therefore, the keli has to have the beetle at the level, on the most profound manner. Where is this ability in the keli source? Where does it come from into the keli? The keli is a mitzias in the world, a tangible mitzias. Where is the beetle aspect in the keli come from? Even though it's brought out through the oil, but to be bottled altogether, even to the oil, but the result of the oil also is a miracle thing, miraculous thing. The oizois at the end of the second line, the back inside. The oizois, and even beyond that. In other words, particularly the koyach nikela to be bottled to the oil, the oizois, and even to the point that the beetle in the keli should be in such a manner, the beetle in the keli should be such that it should be a beetle be'etzem mahusa. Etzem mahusa means it is not a beetle of submission. Submission means that the submitted entity is still an entity. Be'etzem mahusa means that there is no entity anymore. It's completely self-effacing. There is now an entity. Therefore, if there is no entity, therefore the oil that it carries comes through in full purity, because there is no an intermediary by which it is being brought. The intermediary is totally bottled. And this is what the Rebbe is saying, that the koyach and the keli, that the keli should be bottled in such a manner, beetle be'etzem mahusa, a beetle of the quality that their complete presence is eliminated. To the point, at the end of the second line, of the third line, sheyisyachdu b'oir ein soif baruch. To the extent that the kelim unite with the oil in soif baruch. And here we have to reflect. And to reflect, we have to express certain phenomenal principles in this. Oil ein soif baruch, is truly, it's called oil ein soif because it is oil ein soif. World, by definition, anything that has any kind of worldly presence cannot be ein soif. In world, everything has to have a beginning. If it has a worldly presence, it has to have a beginning, a middle, and an ultimate goal. Ein soif is possible only at the level of something which has no beginning, which has not come to be. Does not come to be. Anything that comes to be is not ein soif. And here we say that the kelim are bottled in such a way that they can be misyache, that they can unite and allow the oil and soif to come through them, so that they become as pure as oil and soif itself. What is the purity of oil and soif? The purity of oil and soif is that it is a presence without a beginning. Anything that has a beginning cannot be fully pure. A beginning means it has a defining element that it represents, that's brought out. Oil and soif means the oil its own truth, without a beginning. The truth of oil as the truth of the truth itself is true. We tried many times. We cannot define the meaning of the word truth, but we can speak about it sufficiently that it begins to kind of reverberate in our mind. We said many times there's a difference between true and truth. True means that you're describing something that is a subject that you are identifying as being true. Truth is a completely different ilk, completely different phenomenon. Even to the extent that it may be difficult for us in our little minds to conceptualize that there is such a thing as truth. We can only think really in our mind of true. This is true. But truth, which means there's no this is, but the truth itself, the reality of truth. This requires a focused effort on our part to recognize that in fact, there is such a thing as truth. Which means in very simple terms that the fact that there is a world is not an accident. It's an intended presence. There is truth to it. The Creator wants that there should be the world. Even though the world is a creation, but there's a divine truth to it. This divine truth in the world, this explains why in the world there are rules how you're supposed to behave. Divine rules how you're supposed to behave. There are mitzvahs. What does mitzvahs have to do with world? World has its own set of values. Don't rob, don't kill, don't destroy. These are all things within worldly parameters. But mitzvahs go beyond worldly parameters. Mitzvahs speak of a truth beyond worldly parameters. Where does that come? How does that relate to world? The answer is that world itself is really sourced in a divine spirit, ruach, will, chayus.
Okay. That, I guess it's going to be developed, but that answer right there, okay, it's that sentence, that statement, the world itself is sourced in the divine will. Okay.
Thank you for repeating it several times to make an emphasis of this, because in fact it is deserving of this emphasis.
Right. It's a pivotal statement. It's not yet clear what it's saying, but it's carrying a big load right now.
Let me put it in our terms, in context with our lives. There are 7 days in our week. The 7 days in our week, we could say, is a natural cycle. Although there's nothing natural about it in the world, but this is due to the fact that the world was created in 7 days, and therefore the world has a 7 days cycle. One of these 7 days is called Shabbos. Shabbos is also one of the 7 days in the world. However, the principle of Shabbos is a completely different than that of Sunday and all the other days. It's also one of the 7 days of the divine world, is a time cycle. Yet, its requirements and its principles are completely different. To the extent that on Shabbos, you're not even allowed to do a worldly action. Anything that will structure, create, build something in the world, build. What can be wrong with building world? Shabbos is outside of that perimeter. Because Shabbos represents not the worldly presence, but the Creator's aspect in the worldly presence. As we say, Shabbos is Shabbos Hashem Elokecha. It's a divine day. It's part of the world, and it's a divine day. It's a holy day. The creation of Shabbos, I'm sure you all know, the creation of Shabbos, you could say Rahman Litzlan Chas v'Sholom, is the worst violation of the Mebish's world possible. It's even worse than the violation of Yom Kippur.
Right, and that's because it's God's day, and it's showing how nature is not natural, basically.
Nature is natural, but it's not self-made. Nature is the Eibishter had given nature a divine reality. Can it be anything more natural than a divine reality?
Okay, and we got into all of this because we're looking at how could a Keli also be
Contain
battle,
the oil. Represent the oil, and ultimately connect to Ein Sof.
and okay, good, and represent the or, meaning not just be itself and have some utility, but actually be a representative of light.
Or bring a light in, right? The oil in soif, not the oil in soif, the elokus itself.
Okay, and we're beginning to answer that now with that sentence from a minute ago where we said that. What did we say when we said? Mhm.
She sounded the third line at the end of the third line.
The world itself is source in divine will.
That the kelim should be misyachet be'erin soif. We have to reflect on these words. Yishyach the be'erin soif means that they want to become the be'erin soif. Bitul, the word bitul in our concept means something that exists and continues to exist, but it is submissive. It recognizes that there is something greater than itself. But this is not the beetle we're talking about. We're talking about a beetle that allows the kelim to actually unite with AYIN soif. AYIN soif is completely outwardly. It's completely divine. Divine means it has no beginning. Doesn't have any of the qualities that qualify a keli. Yet the kelim can become so refined and so bottled that they actually unite back with the AYIN soif. And this is the Rebbe's question. What kind of koyach is this? What kind of quality is this? What kind of inner power within the keli it is this that allows the keli to be so bottled that it should be mishach be'erin soif? There should be nothing left of itself. Not that it should cease to be a keli, it is still a keli, but nothing left of its own cognizance, and it becomes mishach be'erin soif. It unites with AYIN soif. AYIN soif means that it's outwardly reality. All right, let's go into the answer to this phenomenal question. Zehu, at the end of the third line, Zehu, this phenomenon that allows the keli to become so bottled to the extent that it's mishach be'erin soif. This is mebechinas hamaki v'tirei lo. This is the effect of a makif. First of all, the effect of the makif. Meaning, in other words, it is not the effect of the oil that is contained, the pnimi that's contained in the keli. The oil that is contained in the keli cannot effectuate this kind of beetle in the keli. It brings oil and so forth, but does not mishach be'erin soif. It still remains a keli. To effectuate a beetle of the kelim such that the kelim would be nisyachet be'ayrin soif. Again, what's ayrin soif? Ayrin soif means prior to the source of kelim. The ayrin soif is unto itself. The kelim are completely oblivion, unidentified, unidentifiable. Let me explain these words. Kelim are completely unidentifiable. Kelim, by definition, have to have a starting point. A starting point exists only on the worldly level. The world has a beginning. Oyer Ein Sof, by definition, what Oyer Ein Sof is, it's the truth itself. The truth itself has no beginning. The truth is true. There is no moment of time when truth becomes true. Not a moment of time, not a point of existence, of space, where truth becomes true. Truth is always true. Whether you know about it or you don't know about it, don't know about it, the truth is always there and always true. This is the meaning of the word truth. And this is the meaning of Oyer Ein Sof. Oyer Ein Sof is the reality itself, which has no beginning and no middle nor end. And this is the great point that Rebbe is making, that the Kelim ultimately reach such a level of self-nullification, which means a superworldly type of purity, such that will allow the Kelim to unite with the Oyer Ein Sof. Oyer Ein Sof is, that we said, this is a superworldly reality. The in the Lakus Atzilukus is unto itself. Kelim are worldly presences. Definition of Keli is how you present things in the world. So if Kelim are by definition presenting things in the world, how can the Kelim become so united with Oyer Ein Sof, a battle that they unite with Oyer Ein Sof? Oyer Ein Sof is above world, prior to world. If Keli is a worldly definition, how is that relate to Oyer Ein Sof, which is beyond world? But Kelim begin at the point of world, it would seem. This is the question. And if Kelim, just repeating it so that we'll see the emphasis of it. If Kelim begins, is a worldly presence, which means it begins at the point of world conceptualization, how can it reach up to a point beyond world? It's out to Oyer Ein Sof world. That they unite with Oyer Ein Sof, which is a point beyond world. And the explanation to this is, okay, at the end of the third line, Zehu, that beetle in the Kelim is the effect. Mebchinas hamakiv is from the aspect of the makiv, from the level of the makiv, which is called makiv didhiru ilo. All the time, so throughout this, up until this point, we're talking about makiv, and we said we're talking about makiv didhiratato. Hiratato means the lower purity, the lower level of makiv. But the lower level of makiv has a worldly connotation, limit. It's a makiv within worldly parameters. Here we're saying that we're coming to a point where there is superworldly qualities in the cave. Therefore, there has to have a source, an effect of something superworldly. And this is what we said, that this is the makiv didhiri ilo. There's another level of makif. This makif is not a participant, so to speak, in the creation of the world. The world begins from Tirat Torah. The meaning that the world begins from Tirat Torah means the world factually in its surface, it surfaces from the point of Tirat Torah. However, the original source, the concept, the intent of world precedes worldly development. Precedes the makif or Tirat Torah, of the hero of the divine presence as it recognizes, gives presence to world. Rather, there is the makif of what's called the Tehira, the supreme purity. The purity as it is focused and contained within the AYIN itself. Not as the purity is expressed coming through to begin world. But Tehira as it is within the Elokus itself. This Tehira, this supreme divine purity, this is the source that effectuates such a beetle in the kelim that the kelim are then capable to be nishachet b'Torah itself. To unite with Torah itself. Kelim are worldly presences, and yet kelim can unite with Torah itself. Because in kelim there is the effect of that which is higher than the world. Makif the Tehira. The question now is, how is that connected to kelim? This is makif Tehira, this is super worldly. Kelim are worldly. So how, so to speak, is this crossover from Tehira into kelim? And here is a shocking statement. The Tehira, the makif Tehira, this is really shoresh u'mokir hakelim. In truth, the Tehira is the root of the kelim. Kelim are ultimately rooted not on the worldly level, Tirat Torah, recognizing world, but Tehira. Kelim have a mokir in that which is super worldly. Makif Tehira. Shoresh u'mokir hakelim. The shoresh u'mokir hakelim is Tehira, not Tirat Torah. Tirat Torah is the message, is a process, part of the process of bringing it forth. But the root, the defining element of kelim, goes way above that. And thus, if this is sourced in Tehira, Tehira means the supreme Tehira, the divine Tehira, the divine truth as it is to itself, not as it recognizes world. Therefore, we come to a completely different perception. That the beetle of the kelim, the self-notification of kelim, to allow kelim to relate to AYIN Sof. The beetle of the kelim, magia, reaches up, l'maylo meha beetle shel ha'oyer. The beetle of the kelim actually reaches up to a point higher than the beetle of oir. Okay. This is really a phenomenal statement. The beetle of Kalim, we thought is Mitzias, is the way the things are presented to the world. Now, all of a sudden, we're coming to realize and we're realizing it from the fact that we see this phenomenon in the Kalim. We see that the Kalim have a beetle they're able to mishach b'yin soif. That means that they have some kind of a connection, a relationship. So there has to be some source in soif. Which means that the Kalim are sourced, have a connection, have a source in Eretz Soif, which is the Makib Tirilo. That is the Sheresh Maki HaKalim. The Makib Tirilo, this is the Sheresh Maki, this is the real root. In other words, the real root means not where the Kalim begin to formulate and reveal themselves. This is the real root. This is what permits the whole inner of Kalim. Conceptualizes Kalim. The conceptualization of Kalim is way above world. This is from the Makib of Tehillah law.
Yona, time check?
Yeah.
Time check.
Yes, sir.
6 minutes till 9 o'clock. So.
Okay. Apologize. Okay, but I had to go to do this.
And
Okay.
I'll try to be more punctual. Thank you, Daniel.
No. Okay.
So, unless somebody wants to go, I'm getting a thought that may or may not be accurate or useful. I'm getting the idea that our answer to why the Keli is Batal is because it's rooted up above and it's even rooted higher than the Or, which is quite interesting itself. But just that answer that materiality, nature is not limited unto itself. It has a maker, and therefore it is nullified to its maker. Is that a good, useful summary?
We are speaking about a more refined concept in this. Maker and so forth, this is all part of the process of bringing it forth. We're speaking about the origin of the possibility of there being Keli. The concept of Keli. Concept is way before materiality.
Okay, and that brought us to this last point, that this concept higher than the materiality is rooted higher than the light itself. Is that what
That's
we said?
right. The concept of Kalim supersedes the concept of oir.
Okay, and there's no real way, we haven't said anything about what that would mean or why that would be the case, right?
Right, not yet. We already covered it, but we didn't really make the proper emphasis and clarification.
Okay, and then back to my basic sense that our answer of why Metzius, the Yeshus, the thing itself, the Keli itself would be ready and able to be nullified to light, is because it's based upon a higher intention, and therefore it sort of lands up fulfilling its purpose. It just looks to us like doimim, like just materiality, but really it is nullifying itself to a much higher intent. Would that be good?
Yes, I mean, when you say nullifying itself, all that has to be put in perspective and understood. But yes, let me put it in very simple terms. Nullifying itself means that the message that the Keli carries
Okay.
the message that the Keli carries
I woke her up.
Sorry, go ahead.
is the presence of the source of the Elokus rather than the presence of the world. The present message that the Keli carries is, yes, there's a world, but this world has a creator, not a process by which it gets created. A creator. The creator himself defines world. From his perspective, world has a presence on the creator's value level. Not only to effectuate a worldly process.
Okay.
And being such, therefore the world represents the creator's level of purity and truth.
Okay, so we're kind of saying two things. One is the world is really here, and
Maybe I should give a little bit of a demonstration of this, and we'll be able to relate to it better. Although the only way to explain it is, as we said now, just want to point out, how do we celebrate Shabbos? Shabbos is the holiest day on our calendar. To the extent that Shabbos is not even called the day of the world. Shabbos Hashem Elokecha. Yom Tov is Yom Tov has to do with Eden. Shabbos has not to do with world. Shabbos is the Eibushin's day. How do we celebrate Shabbos? First thing is we make Kiddush on the cup of wine. And do you know that the imperative, the requirement of eating on Shabbos is more important than even eating on Yom Tov? Hey, you would think Shabbos is a holy day, divine day. To fast on Shabbos is absolutely not permitted. To the extent, let me give you an example. Somebody has what's called a tanis chaloim. Somebody has a dream. There are certain dreams that a person, in order to nullify the effect of this dream, has to fast. And this is so important and so significant that even if it turns out on Shabbos, you're allowed to fast on Shabbos. One situation where you have to fast on Shabbos is tanis chaloim. Can I finish my sentence? Tanis chaloim. The din is, listen to this. The person has to fast on Shabbos because it's tanis chaloim. But he has violated the Shabbos. He fasted on Shabbos. In order to atone for this violation of Shabbos, he has to fast another day to atone for the fasting on Shabbos. This is how imperative it is to eat on Shabbos.
Well, that's interesting.
Isn't it?
That's pointing out that we're
On this holiest of days, you must eat.
that means the worldliness. What we do something very worldly to indicate the holiest.
That's right.
And that's because what? We're acknowledging that right through and through down into this lowest world, things and materiality is nested in God's intent.
Oh, that's right. The Shoresh of Kalim, as we're saying over here, the Shoresh of Kalim is higher than the Shoresh of oil.
Okay, and we haven't got into that yet, but that's to say there's some kind of superiority in dealing with actions and specific materials, etc.
Yeah, we're first touching upon this.
Okay.
It's not going to be an easy transition, but this is where we are going. With Nebuchadnezzar's help.
Okay, and there's no real good mashal for the way that doimim, basically, and kalim are rooted higher in God's intent. The regular hierarchy, the regular way is, doimim at the bottom, sort of they're just saying that they're just being here, and then medaber is the higher level. But now we've sort of flipped it all over. And I don't know if we have a real good mashal to think about that.
We have a good mashal for it, but we have to then bring out the finest aspect of our own intellect. The mashal for this, that brings it home, if we can apply it, as I said, the final aspect of our seichel. At a wedding, you serve food. This food is presented in different ways. First of all, there's a smorgasbord that is free for all. Then there are the center plates on the tables. The ultimate presentation of food at a wedding, the highest level, is when each one gets his own plate served to him at his place. You would think this is the lowest level.
Why? Okay, good. Why is this a good mashal, and why would you think it's the lowest level?
Because it's the lowest level, because it's the most physical. It's the least reminiscent representative of the simcha.
Because it's the personal and it's specific to each person.
Because
they seemingly alone.
One second. The reason it is personal, the reason it is specific is because we are in a world. In the world, in order that it should be identified on the worldly level, it has to be very specific.
And it's a good, yeah. It's a good mashal because it's within a simcha, but yet you're breaking out to your setting and your serving and your plate, right?
Right. So that you're defining the simcha at a completely worldly level instead of a spiritual experience.
As if to say the very elaborate wedding, and the more money spent, the better.
Don't worry. You'll have all the money you'll need when you have to come to weddings. Don't worry.
Please God. But it's kind of going in that direction, right? The more elaborate, it's linen, it's napkins that are linen, it's the chinaware, it's cut crystal.
Elaborate is your word. Specific.
Okay. Okay, so it's not the luxury per se, but it's something about the specificity that shows on worldliness, and yet that's the way, just like Shabbat, like Shabbos and the food, that physicality, that specificity is the greatest acknowledgement of the highest level, yeah?
Oh, that's it. Now we're talking.
And I mean, that's a great mashal, I guess, but we don't, I mean, the fact that it works that way is quite amazing, right? I mean, you might think the high point of the wedding is everybody dancing together and being battle, and the food is completely incidental. So the fact that it really works that way and that this mashal stands is quite mysterious.
Well, first, before you go to a mysterious aspect of it, do we understand? We could readily see that is the fact.
I guess as Yidden we do. I mean, yeah, as Yidden we do see that is the fact. This is the way.
Stop for a moment. The way these things have to work, so is this. First, you recognize, this is the fact. Now you dig into your own intelligence, into your own neshama.
Yeah.
And try to see where that fact is sourced.
Okay, so in acknowledging this fact, I may start to think, that we keep Shabbos with such physicality might just be a compromise, just like we what's the word? Giving something to the nefesh of Bahamas, because I'm in a physical body, so it's like besides the point, but I have to do it to bring the body, to bring the gashmis on board. Like we say l'chaim, to give the guf something to do. So I might start thinking
that you would think if you do not experience the Shabbos correctly, fully. The reason you would think about this is because you want to make sense of your activities with your own little seichel.
Okay, but the true experience.
This is not how it's presented in the Torah.
Right. Good. So the presentation in the Torah is that the very physicality is a testimony to the kedusha. It's not besides the point. It's not detracting. It's not a compromise. It is the actual kedusha.
That's right.
Pretty wild.
The pasuk, "Echem asmanim u'stem mamtakim." Shabbos, you have to eat the best kind of food, the tastiest kind of food. All of a sudden, all this coffee and all self-refinement put away, and start and experience Shabbos on the most physical level.
Baruch Hashem.
And that's like, okay, good. And that's good. And that's like the king's palace is not a show of wealth. It's a indicator of his dignity. Okay, good.
Yep. And ultimately, we have to try to come into the center point. Once we run through the circles and we recognize this is so, the reason we are allowed to go into the circles is, please understand, to understand the central point. By expressing it, we're going to lose it. We first have to have this sense of it, the insight as it comes from our intellect, our neshama. Once we have that, on the basis of that, then we can go and define it in definitive terms.
Okay.
Once you recognize, yes, indeed, that is the truth. And we reflect on this. We find this in our own intellect. We recognize this from our own perspective. Yes, this is the way it should be. This is the way the reality is. Then we can start trying to understand how come the reality is this way. And what in fact is behind it.
Yeah. Okay.
I have a quick question. We've emphasized the difference between truth and true. So we said that truth, on one side, truth is always true, and on the other side, truth becomes true. So that was related to the fact that the Kalim are worldly and they also connect to Or Ein Sof. So, and we said that the Kalim are battled to the effect of a Makif, which is Ira Ilah, Tehira Ilah. So how do we reconcile truth with true in this particular topic?
I don't understand the question at all. Oil and serve, that's truth.
Okay. So.
And the presence of world is rooted in oil and serve.
Okay.
The Alter Rebbe says in Tanya the following words: that the creation of Yesh Me'ayin, the physical world, which is a creation, the most phenomenal part of creation, Yesh Me'ayin, this is representative, and it is within capability exclusively of Hashem Himself. No other spheres, no other qualities, Ruchensike qualities are able to create Yesh Me'ayin. Hu levadehu, this is the words in Tanya. Hu levadehu, v'koichi v'yicholte. Only he has the capability. Leave the Yesh Me'ayin to create a Yesh Me'ayin, Yesh from non-apparent, ve'efes amuchlot, and total nothingness. Only he can create from total nothingness, which is only his capability. Because he can reach out to total nothingness and reveal things in it, which is my additional, so to speak, elaboration on this. All right. Okay. So everything is clear.
And the fact that we said that divine has no beginning.
That's right. Which is why divine is able to create Yesh Me'ayin. Ayin means nothing, no beginning.
Oh, okay. Oh yeah, sure.
So what's going on here?
Why is it because Ayin has no beginning, therefore it's able to create a Yesh?
This is not what we said. But nonetheless, these words that you're saying have a truth. AYIN doesn't create anything. Only the Rebbe can create. And he can create yesh me'ayin. The creation of a yesh means a true presence, something that exists independently of everything else. A real yesh. In order to create that anything that's made is independent of everything else, that thing has to be made come from AYIN. Because if it comes from other yesh, it remains dependent on that yesh from where it comes from. If you say that it's a real yesh, which means a yesh that is independent of any other existence, of any other presence.
It means to say like it's resembling the AYIN.
It's right, it's the counterpart of the AYIN. The opposite of the AYIN, the counterpart of the AYIN. The AYIN is a pure AYIN. The yesh is also a pure yesh. It's a real yesh. Totally independent. That's like AYIN is independent of anything else. Yesh is also a true yesh. It doesn't need anything else to support it. Anything else to justify its presence.
To get it clear again, as the AYIN is not dependent, so the yesh is, so is the yesh.
The yesh, I didn't hear what you said. The yesh that comes from AYIN is a true yesh. A true yesh means a stand-alone entity that is completely self-satisfied, self-supporting. It exists because it exists.
Okay, and such a phenomenon can only come from the AYIN because
Anything that has an identifiable source remains connected to that source, remains representing that source. Never becomes a true yesh of its own. You make a table, and it's your design, everything is yours, but the material from which you made it remains material as it was before you made it.
so the point is that because we can't trace it to the AYIN, this is the point.
I'm saying you can or you cannot trace it.
We cannot, because we cannot trace it to the AYIN. This is the point. That's why it's a true yes.
What do you mean you cannot trace it? You can trace it to the AYIN. What are you tracing it to? What can you trace is
Because
the
the
AYIN?
AYIN you can trace. You don't see the
Okay.
AYIN.
That's right. So why you trace it to the AYIN? It has no beginning. When do you trace it? How do you trace to AYIN?
You cannot trace because you cannot.
You can. The reason you cannot is because AYIN is a non-entity, not because you cannot trace it.
Okay, because it's a non-entity. Because I'm asking, is this the reason or is there a different reason why it's a true yes when it comes from the AYIN?
I don't understand. I'd like to understand your terminology. What tracing? How does what tracing come in here?
Okay, so what else? I don't know. I understood that this is what was said before.
No, we didn't use the word tracing. The word, the yesh may ayin means that prior to this yesh, there was nothing that permitting the Yesh to come into existence. The Yesh came into being at a point of time which is not a provider for Yesh. No reason whatsoever. There is no basis for the Yesh to come into being at this particular instant. He got created when the Creator wanted to create. Let's speak in human terms. You wake up in the morning. Wake up. Wake up at some point in time. You wake up at some point in time. That point in time is something which is instrumental in you getting to wake up. You don't wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning. You wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning. Because it's suitable for waking up. If a person wakes up at 2 o'clock in the morning, he says he had a disturbed night. Something woke him up. He didn't wake up in a natural way. This is not waking up time. Waking up in the right time, this is what's called waking up. Exclusively because he's waking up. Not because of any other causes. Again, we're going in circles. I don't know exactly what is bothering you. What's not clear in this.
I'll try to listen over to it. So hopefully,
Say again?
I'll listen over to the audio. Hopefully, I'll get.
Whenever we try to paraphrase, the reason we try to paraphrase is because something is not clear in the way we phrase it. I'd like to know what's not clear in the way we phrase it. What's missing?
It's not missing in what is being said. It's missing for me.
Yeah.
The AYIN creates the Yesh, and the Yesh is a true Yesh, and a true Yesh can become only from the AYIN, because the AYIN is true. This here I'm not so.
All right. Not because the AYIN is true. Because if the Yesh is created from the AYIN, that means that the Yesh has its own beginning. It didn't begin from something prior to its presence. Because prior to its presence, it was AYIN. There was nothing there.
Okay, I think so. Now it was like they said, it was hit on the
head. Okay. All right.
Okay.
Good, Davis.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good day, guys.